So guys, I'm just gonna play you a little snippet from this Britney Spears song called Lucky. Let's have a quick listen. So it says, if there is nothing missing in my life. Let's play the next bit. Okay, so then it says, then why do these tears come at night? And I'll tell you straight away why those tears are coming at night for Lucky, because there is something missing in Lucky's life. And that is a Ryzen 7 7800 X3D gaming system. And today we are going to be building this PC from start to finish using the latest Antec C7 RGB case, the RX 7900 XTX, and also some Crucial DDR5, as well as a 1TB Gen 5 NVMe drive, an ASRock live mixer motherboard. I'll put all the prices up on the screen for you. We're coming in a tad under $2,000, which makes this a high-end gaming PC that's actually not going to break the bank. Also, big thanks for Antec, Crucial, and STD Keys for sponsoring out today's video. I'll show you guys what their parts are, what they're all about, and the value they bring to the table, as well as how you can activate Windows on this first PC really easy and for really cheap. With all that aside though, let's start this build off and talk about what makes it so special. So this PC build will hopefully be straightforward. I'm going to show you guys how to tune this system up a little bit later in terms of the DDR5 memory. But what we've got to do right now is sort of prep the motherboard before it goes into the case. And for this, we've just got to push this latch down here and then pop the hood on this CPU socket. Make sure you do not touch any of these pins right here. They can bend easily, and if you bend them, then you're generally going to be out of luck. Your computer might not work, then you'll have to bend them back. But what we're doing right here, you can see, grabbing our CPU, lining up this arrow in the corner with the corner that it's located in, and we're just gently putting it in. I like to just give it a little wiggle to make sure it's properly in place there. Then we close the hood there, and then we latch that down, and make sure that you just got to latch it in properly. Like, we'll do that again. Latch it in, and it's all good to go. Now, the next thing we got to do is grab this DDR5 memory. And if you've got 2 sticks of memory, you generally want to put it in the outer channel. So how DDR5 memory works is very similar to DDR4 memory in that there's a channel, and that's, you can see basically one space between those linked up slots. And so what you want to do is put it on the 4th and 2nd slot generally. That's the outside slots. So what I'm doing here is putting it in the 4th slot and the 2nd slot. And the reason I'm not putting in the 1st and the 3rd slot is because, at least from what I know and what I was told from the extreme overclockers, is that the outer channel, that's the 2nd and 4th slot, they actually are slightly closer to the CPU than the 1st and the 3rd. So in other words, you get slightly better performance by putting it in this case, is what's called A2 and B2 on this motherboard. So that's usually the best way to insert memory if you've only got 2 sticks versus 4 sticks. Now it's time to install our M.2 drive, and what we're using here is the top slot on this particular motherboard because it's a Generation 5 M.2 slot, PCIe NVMe. Now it's also got a heatsink, which is very important because we're using a Crucial T705 Generation 5 drive. Now a drive like this is actually really cool, and I'm happy I get to promote this drive because it's coming in at a really good price for a Generation 5 drive. A 1TB of this solution will set you back a little over $150 at this point in time, but it's going to be some of the fastest storage out there, and we'll show you a little bit later how fast this stuff actually is, and also check some game load times, how quickly games load up on this particular Generation 5 drive. Crucial also offer the T705 with a heatsink for an extra $30, but also you may notice in the frame we're using the Crucial DDR5 Pro memory. This is 6000 CL36. Now with the X3D chip, especially the 7800 X3D, you don't have to worry too much about your DDR5 speeds. I actually recently did a video testing out DDR5 speeds, and on the X3D chips, there wasn't a whole lot of a difference. So this stuff coming in around $100 for a 32GB kit makes a lot of sense if you are value orientated. But basically now we just screw this thing off back into play and make sure the screws are Then just wrist tight. So in other words, when my wrist meets resistance, I've then tightened the screws in just enough. Now next up here, we're going to install the CPU cooler, and for this we're going with a Snowman all black edition just to match the aesthetic, but this thing is only costing a little over $30, and we'll show you the cooling performance later. It does a really good job, especially coupled in with the X3D chips. And what we got right here, very simple, straightforward CPU cooler install with this thing. We get these 4 screws included. We just screw them down to the motherboard. You may also have to sometimes detach and unscrew these 2 little plates on the board. But in this case, this board already had them detached when I opened the box. But just get these screws screwed off, and then we can start to install our CPU cooler. Now, a lot of your coolers will include thermal paste, so we just put a little bit of thermal paste right down here. I just like to put a generous amount, and most thermal paste is like non-conductive. Even if you get this cooler right here, the Snowman, it comes with some non-conductive, non-capacitive cooling paste, so you don't have to worry too much. Now, insert the brackets, attach them to the cooler like so, and then we just simply put this cooler and slot it onto the motherboard, and then we start screwing it off. Now generally with your cooling screws, these final ones here, you can hand screw them off, but if you're really weak, you're a puny, weak individual, then you may wish to use a screwdriver just to screw that off. So with the motherboard all complete, it is now time to insert it into the case. Now the best thing about the Antec C7 here is that it's already got, for a full-size ATX motherboard, as you can see here, all the basically screw holes are all lined up perfectly. So you don't have to change any of these out from the get-go. You can just line it up like we've done here and then start screwing off our motherboard. Now, usually you should have the case facing face down, so it's easier to screw it in. But because we're doing a video here, we can just do it like this and should look good for the camera. So now it's time to start screwing off the motherboard, but you'll notice here we've got a case with all these screws and bits and bobs that we need, as well as some Velcro straps and some zip ties that we'll need later on. But what we're going to talk about quickly as well while we're screwing this motherboard off is the Antec C7. That's the case that we're using here today, and just why I'm gladly taking a sponsorship from Antec with this case, because I've reviewed some of their cases in the past and they've just been phenomenal. And this one, already I can tell it's another Antec story of just really good value and just them thinking of everything that you need when it comes to PC building. Now, most of this case is actually magnetic, and you've got easily detachable sides, as well as the rear and the side panels. They're detachable magnetically, so you don't even need screws for those. At the rear, there's 2 screws you need to undo if you want to get to the back cable access management area, which at the rear, you've got 32 millimeters of cable management available, which is just gonna make cable management a breeze on this case when we get onto that later. But here at the front, you'll notice we've also got 3 RGB fans on the side here, 120 mils pre-installed, and then you've got a 140 mil at the rear pre-installed going to a controller at the back, which is included all at the price of $140. And then you've got a dust filter at the bottom, 4 millimeter glass at the front and the side. So you've got a 270 degree look here, which is called the fish tank look. But Antec have done their own design here, so you can detach the top as well as fit a 360 mil rad there. However, if you do put in a big fat 360 mil radiator on the side here, your horizontal mounted GPU can only go up to 280 mil, but without it, it goes up, and this is what we're gonna use here, goes up to 450 mil. But also there's another catch with this case, and that is if you want to mount a GPU vertically, which is what we're gonna be doing in today's video, you can then, all you have to do is actually just unscrew 4 screws at the back here, and then buy your own PCIe riser cable, and then you can mount your GPU vertically. So even if you've got a big fat 360 mil rad, you can actually push the GPU out and get past that all by just mounting a GPU vertically. And since PCIe riser cables, especially even 4.0 versions, are inexpensive nowadays, you can get away with actually having a really good looking PC without breaking the bank too much. So now we're just about screwing this motherboard off. It's time to talk about the next step that we're going to do here, and that is to install the power supply. Now, what we've got here is a bracket at the back that comes included with this, so you can just attach your power supply to the bracket and then pretty much just insert the power supply and get all the cables ready, and we are good to go. And then we can go on to the next step of just plugging up all the cables and getting the build finished. So screwing your power supply bracket off, there's generally only one way to screw this in, and you'll see this top left-hand corner here lines up with that indented top left-hand corner, as opposed to all the other areas are all to the edge of the power supply. So that's how you line that one in, but we also have to use thicker screws here, and so they're just different ones to the motherboard, and so we just start screwing that off, and once we get that in, we'll be ready to start inserting the power supply. Now, another thing I forgot to mention is we're going with a 1000 watt power supply for this build. The reason being is we're using a 7900 XTX. This is a high powered GPU, but also a power supply like this comes in, I checked in America, an Antec 1000 watt power supply is coming in around 130 bucks. You definitely want to just spend that little bit extra on a power supply when it comes to a high-end build, especially if you're using a high-end graphics card. In this case, it's a modular power supply, so we've hooked all the cables that we need up to the power supply before we insert the power supply, and that is our motherboard 24 pin, as well as our 2 PCIe, actually in this case we need 4 PCIe 8 pins, and then we've got 2 CPU connectors, as well as a SATA connector as well. So all those connectors are ready to go, and we can then put the power supply in the rear. And also, since this power supply is a bracket, we can just simply screw this on and we are good to go. So this is another benefit of this C7. It's just making our life easier. And now we are going to get on to the next part of the build, that is turning this thing around. And once we take that back panel off and unscrew this screw at the top and bottom here, we've then got our doors that open up to reveal all the back end of the case here. So even if we're bad at cable management, which I personally, it's my Achilles heel of PC tech, I'm not that great at cable management, this stuff will hide a lot of that poor cable management. And it's also got the Velcro screws for the main cable lines already pre-attached. Now, another thing is too, if you wish to install some 2.5-inch SSD bays, then you've got the option to install 6 of those, 2 at the bottom and the front of the case, or if you're installing 3.5-inch hard drives, you can install 3 of those. So 2 at the back here and 1 inside the case. So in total, either 6 SSDs or 4 SSDs and 2 hard drives, or 3 hard drives and 2 SSDs. A little bit of a weird math problem there mid-video. So what we're doing now is pulling all the cables out, getting ready to start routing them to the front of the PC. Now, there's also, we've pulled out here the front input-output panel, and that is the cables that come from that front panel. We've got things like our USB Type-C, as well as our HD audio, and our USB 3, and our power switch and power LED buttons. All right, so HD audio, bottom left, generally it only goes in one way, so you can't really mess that one up unless you've got a pretty low IQ. But even then, if you've got a low IQ, I think you should be absolutely fine to route that one up. And then the power switch goes on the top here of the bottom right hand, at least on this motherboard. Sometimes the front panels can be a little bit over to the left, but in this case, it's a straightforward affair. And then our power positive and negative, we just hook them up with the power positive. I'll show you guys a little diagram on the screen here so you can't mess that one up. And then that's those. And then up the top here, we're going to quickly move our camera to the top here and focus that on our USB Type-C, which just goes right there. And that's generally that is a two-way, so it doesn't matter which way you plug it in. And then we've got our USB 3, just plug that one off too. All right, so there's our front I/O all connected. Now it's time to do the same, except for all the power cables that we are going to need. So here we've got at the top left-hand corner of this build, we've got 2 CPU 8 pins, and then we're gonna need our graphics card cables to be routed. I generally like to route them through the bottom of the build here, even though it's gonna be a bit of a tight fit, and then we're gonna get our motherboard cable routed through there. So we'll quickly do this in real time because it shouldn't be that difficult to do. Just quickly get the cable. Here's the motherboard, popping his head through just to say, hello fellas, how you doing? And then we get our CPU, same deal. And I gotta say, this is that extra cable room we talked about at the back of the case. It's gonna make things a breeze later on, but even the routing of the cables right now in this C7 is an absolute breeze. And so what we got right here is all those cables that we need there. And I'm thinking with this case, I may actually just route my power cables through just here on the, even though I said I like to route them through the bottom, probably just route them through the side here because we just got so many of them and it's actually more of a tidier fit. So all those are coming through, bam. Now we're just gonna route those off to where they need to go. So here it is right here, bingo. And then the CPU connectors. And this is one thing I like about this case. I really like about this case. I mean, if you're mounting a 360mm rad at the top, you might not have enough space. But here we've just got so much room. We can just dance around here with our hands and just get these CPU cables in so easily. So this case, man, I gotta say, like, impressive design. All right, CPU cables are installed. Now it's time to get our GPU in. And now usually you just unplug the side here, but as we said before, we are actually going to vertically mount this graphics card right here. So it's actually going to use a little bit of a different process. All right, so it's a little bit of a math equation here. We're gonna, whoa, okay, that is probably not going to fit. Yeah, shit, okay. So we're gonna vertically mount this thing, but scratch that. This 7900 XTX from ASRock is actually so big in terms of not just like how big the card is, but also how fat the card is. Usually, a card is a lot thinner, right? I've got a quick example, even though this card's a lot smaller, but the width of the card is a lot thicker. So it just means we're coming to a bit of a problem here. So we're actually, unfortunately, gonna have to just regularly mount this GPU. So say goodbye to our riser cable, but it's good to see that, hey, you can vertically mount a GPU if it's just not as big. It's not as big as the 7900 XTX, or we have a water cooler. So if we've got a water cooler, we can mount, we probably could mount the GPU as well vertically. So all right, so now it's back to the horizontal default configuration. We're just gonna line up what PCIe brackets we need to take out. In this case, it's a triple slot cooler. So we're just gonna undo those 3 side slots right there and then insert the GPU, but also with the Phantom Gaming, back to that size of the card, because it's such a big card, we actually have a special tool that we need to use on once we've installed the GPU, and that's this support bracket right here. So let's insert this GPU and just line it up like so, and then just click that in, which it's already clicked in there. It's actually only a 2 slot. I didn't realize, I thought it was a 3 slot. My bad, my bad. All right, look at that sag, right? So if you don't use a bracket, you can see the GPU's automatically sagging. What we got to do is just lean down and look at this PC vertically and just eyeball it and just say, okay, this needs to go up to here. And I usually like to do this corner right here. All right, done. And that just stops our GPU from sagging or bending over time, and it can actually, on these really big cards, can damage your GPU over time, so do be careful of that. Now, another good thing is the case has the ability to 180mm mount a CPU cooler out. So I actually haven't come into any CPU coolers that are taller than that, but the benefit of having that extra room as well in this case, because we've got such a wide GPU here, we can also get away with having a bit of breathing room with these cables and when we put the tempered glass back on. So now we've got the last piece of the puzzle, and that is the cable management. And what we're gonna do right here is we've got also some ports at the back here. Our RGB controller needs that SATA connection. So we're just gonna plug that up there. And also we've got another connection here for our RGB controller. If we want to plug that up to the motherboard, we can. Now all we're doing is going through here quick and dirty. And that is, we're just finding these slots, right? We put all the cables like that, just really smoothing them out to where they need to go. We can zip tie the cables over there. We can zip tie that over there. So right up here with this top Velcro strap, this is our main man right here. We've got our PCIe cables that have a little bit of extra room. It's not gonna go. So here's where these Velcro straps just come really in handy here for an easy cable management job. And over here, so there it is with cable management, guys. We're just about done here. 4 zip ties in total. Doesn't look the best. I'll actually probably just add another one up here just to make things a little bit cleaner. But that took like 2 minutes. So again, this is extremely easy to work in. That's so easy, even Lucky could do it.
Now that we've finished our gaming PC, it is time to install Windows 10 or 11, it's your choice. I do prefer Windows 10 for Ryzen PCs, and the reason being is just look at the recent news surrounding less performance on what people believe is Windows 11. I had no performance slowdowns in my testing, but that's because I used Windows 10. Anyhow, this process is so straightforward. All we need for this is a USB pen drive. I'm using a 32GB one right here, and we have to have another computer that already has Windows installed on it. So say, for instance, a family member's laptop, you can just go on that quickly and download the Windows Media Creation tool. I'll put the link in the description below. Once we get this tool, we simply insert our USB pen drive, and it will make the Windows 10 or 11 copy automatically for you. However, keep in mind before we do this, if you're using a USB pen drive that's one of your friends or families and it's already got data on it, make sure you copy those important files off, because this process will essentially create a new image on that USB flash drive. In other words, deleting all the old data on it. So make sure you've backed up that USB pen drive if it's not a new one, and so you don't annoy anyone or whatnot. But what we're going to do right now is turn on our PC and got that USB plugged in, and we can start installing Windows 10. Now, for all my systems, I use Windows 10 over Windows 11. That's because there's less clutter, less bloat. It's just easier for me to play games and do my work on Windows 10. Everything just works better for me personally, though your mileage may vary. And also, today's video sponsor, VIP SCD Keys,
head over to the link in the description below where you can get Windows 10 a Pro activated for as little as $15 using that coupon TYC. When I do videos like this, I put in that special code for you guys where you can get activated for very cheap. It's a one-time key, so what it does is hooks up to your motherboard, and then that motherboard is activated for the life of the motherboard itself. And so what we got here is Windows 10 Pro. They've also got Windows 11 Home, Windows 11 Pro keys, as well as Windows 10 Home. And they've also got things like Office if you want to get on Microsoft Excel and Microsoft Word and things like that.
And once you've decided whether you want Windows 10 Home Pro or Windows 11 Home or Pro, you can then get that respective key that you've just bought off the website, which they've got heaps of payment options like credit card or PayPal, and then you just copy paste that key and you can pretty much just go to Windows and paste that in after you've installed Windows. Or if you're like me and you're just doing a fresh install here today, you can just type the code in manually and click next, and Windows should be activated and you should be all good to go. So I'll put some links in the description below on where you can get these cheap keys. Let's get now back to the video. So now that we've just installed Windows, just follow the prompts, and once you're on the desktop, you're essentially ready to go. You're almost there. Download Steam or Epic Games Store, whatever you want to install your games on. But in the meantime, there's still just a couple of things to do, and that is download your graphics card drivers, which if you're on an AMD card like this RX 7900 XTX, you can go to amd.com. I'll put the link in the description below. If you're on an Nvidia RTX GPU, download the latest Nvidia drivers. And then also for the chipset on this 7800 X3D, we have to get the chipset drivers. Now, generally what you do here is just go to your motherboard manufacturer's website. In this case, we've got the B650 Live Mixer. We just type that into Google and then drivers. Then we can download all the respective drivers we need for that particular motherboard and then install all those important drivers as well as your graphics card drivers and the chipset drivers, and then you're good to go. We're now ready to install the games. But one more thing that I'm going to add to this video, make sure your graphics card is outputting the signal to your monitor and you don't have, for instance, your HDMI cable plugged into your motherboard. This is a mistake I see so many times when I sell gaming PCs. So just make sure that cable that's going to your monitor from your computer is plugged off your graphics card. Now, the best thing about a build like this is it's incredibly fast. Now, with this Gen 5 drive, I'll show you some of the gaming boot times on this T705. Not only is the value really good on a drive like this, but also the speeds are the fastest I've seen for any M.2 drive. For instance, we're getting over 10,000 megabytes per second sequential reads, and then also the random 4K writes are so impressive on this drive. So it's gonna make for a really good work drive as well. If you're doing things like video editing and stuff like that, this drive is going to be absolutely phenomenal for those kinds of tasks. Now this drive in particular, what makes it so fast is it's got that Micron TLC latest generation 232 layer NAND on board. It's also got a Phison E26 controller, and you get a healthy warranty with these drives. Now the good thing to report here is the motherboard's heatsink is also keeping this thing under control, like very well under control. Gen 5 drive maxing out at 54 degrees while it's doing these stress tests is actually a really good result to see. Now the last thing here, of course, is 133,000 input outputs per second. Again, absolutely blazingly fast drive. I definitely want to get my hands on a 2 terabyte model for my video editing system because this thing actually just impressed the wazoo out of me, to put it politely. However, if you've made it this far, it's now time to tune up your system with what I'd like to call 2 different ways of tuning. But one thing is, I do recommend, if you're building, especially if this is your first PC, I just recommend not even going into the BIOS to begin with if you don't need to, and run your system for a couple of days. That way, if any problems happen after you tune your system, then you can say, well, maybe the tuning was the problem, as opposed to if you just run your system out of the box at default settings and you come into some problems, then it's most likely going to be a hardware problem. And so that's the big difference between just tuning your system straight away, going just diving straight into it, and just giving yourself a couple of days. But anyhow, first way is the basic way. I believe you should be doing this, right? And that's just go into the BIOS. So when you boot up your PC, just hit delete or F2 as soon as the keyboard lights up, and it'll take you into what's known as the BIOS. And in this screen here, especially if you're using the same motherboard as me, we just find the area in that BIOS that says, okay, lock in our EXPO profiles. And all we do is lock this in by pressing enter on the keyboard, hitting the arrow keys on the keyboard, and then going to that setting, locking that in. And after this, you just press F10, and this is pretty much the same on all different motherboards. You hit F10 and it's gonna go save and exit. And then you just save and exit, and you've now got faster memory speeds, and your system should be running a little bit better. However, I always like to include some optimized settings for Ryzen because I've done a lot of testing on this platform with different CPUs. I can tell you guys some sweet spot settings that I like to put in personally. Now, what I'm gonna do is just simply show you the settings on the screen. So for instance, this Crucial DDR5 memory, we can get an extra 200 megahertz out of this, as well as bumping what's known as the Infinity Fabric just a notch up. On top of this, I do like to use no password on my computer and disable a heap of these extra security settings because I believe personally, and I've done testing in the past, it makes my computer slightly less responsive. So turning off these settings makes my computer slightly more responsive. And so I'm going through the BIOS, changing all these different settings. For instance, I'm also disabling the onboard CPU's graphics, that's the APU graphics portion on the 7800X3D, because it conflicts in Windows. It can get very annoying, especially when I'm doing testing. So I just put this into DGPU mode as well. Then I turn off things like the spread spectrum, so we don't have any problems with USB ports cutting in and out. And then also on top of that, the final one I like to do is disable this SOCOC mode, which enables the computer just to idle at low power consumption states, hence saving me money on my power bill.
But anyhow, let's talk about the case, the temperatures, and then the tuning. Right here, we've got this Antec C7. Now, I've finished doing some tests here. The RX 7900 XTX is a power-hungry GPU, especially this ASRock version we've got here. I was gonna run, typically when I test cases out, like this here, I run Furmark, but Furmark's going near 400 watts direct usage on the GPU. I'm just like, that is just way unrealistic, especially when we go into games and I'm playing Spider-Man, for instance. I'm deciding to test the CPU, cooler, and the ASRock RX 7900 XTX out at the same time. And here's where we're getting much better power consumption, around 300 watts. So we're down about 100 watts while we're playing games. But here's where I've also set the fan speeds to a static temperature, and I'm just gonna test the glass on versus the glass off, because that's how I usually tell if a case has got poor airflow, or it's got decent airflow, or it's got good airflow. In the case of the default configuration here with the 4 fans installed and an air cooler CPU, I've actually got some kind of weird results in that if we've got the glass on, the CPU temperatures actually do better when we're gaming, as a max of 71 degrees versus 73 degrees with the glass off, but then the GPU does worse. So we're looking at 65 degrees on the GPU core versus 63, but then on the hotspot, we're looking at 84 degrees versus 82 degrees. So the hotspot is just like the hottest temperature that's reached on the GPU. So basically with a case like this, if you've got components that have more directed airflow towards the outside of the case, say for instance, maybe a blower style GPU cooler instead of the just dumping the air with 3 fans style GPU that we've got here, you may get better result on the GPU side. But in terms of your air cooler having a push-pull configuration like we've got here, you're actually going to see some impressive results and lower temperatures with the glass on. So it's a good thing to see. Overall, the performance of the Antec C7 is really nice. Those fans are actually relatively quiet, even with me changing in the BIOS the fan speeds to the standard setting. And with all that out of the way, guys, we've taken you through a journey here today of building one of the best high-end gaming PCs that you can build, especially for the money. Now, the 7800 X3D, that's a no-brainer in terms of high-end gaming performance. The power consumption while we're gaming is also really good. And then the 7900 XTX, that's coming in at around $900, and it's giving out some really solid FPS in games. I mean, the Spider-Man Miles Morales, that was giving out really good 4K gaming experience, and also Horizon Zero Dawn, 2 games which aren't easy to run. This GPU is just handling them at 4K high settings, no problems whatsoever. Though I will say, in closing that the sponsors of today's video, Crucial, they've got some great products. The RAM, the drive especially blew me away in terms of value. And then this case right here, the Antec C7, again, I'm just really impressed with some of the gear coming out from some of these brands. Antec in particular have just been nailing their case designs. Not only do they look phenomenal, the included fans do a great job, as we saw here in the performance benchmarks, but just building in this thing in general was just a breeze. I didn't even have to do any retakes of anything here today, or just like no cuts on my hands or anything like that. Just phenomenal. And you've also got extra options inside. If you want to like mount one of those fancy new reverse connector motherboards, you can do that in this case right here. And as we saw with the vertical mount, even though that didn't work, the option's there for anything that I guess is like a normal size GPU. This thing is absolutely massive in relation to the 7900 XTX, but I'm pretty sure we would have got it in there with a water cooler, would have had a bit more extra room there. Anyhow, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's gaming PC. If you did, then be sure to hit that like button. And also, if you want to check out links to build something similar, I'll put all the parts in the description below where you can find them. And also, big thanks to the sponsors of today's video for sponsoring this one out. Also, again, if you want to get Windows activated for dirt cheap, I'll put some links in the description below, and you can get activated too. And also let us know in the comment section below, with this gaming PC, what would you do differently if you had, say, a $2,000 budget? Love reading your thoughts and opinions as always. Me personally, I actually wouldn't change a whole lot. I'd probably go for maybe a 64 gigabyte kit of memory and say a NVIDIA 4070 Ti, just because I do video edit a lot more than game, but the choice is yours. You've got a few options there. But basically, a lot of the core components I wouldn't change. They're phenomenal value. And with that aside, I'll catch you guys in another tech video very soon. Hope you enjoyed this one. Peace out for now. Bye.